welcome back to part 5 of my Alabama versus Oklahoma college football playoff semi-final preview. Today I'm going to be talking about the defenses, and I have a lot to say about defense, so this video is going to be broken up into 2 parts. Today I'm going to talk about the interceptions that the defense have and the pass defense. And then the next video, I'll just let it be a surprise. Come back for that if you want to hear the rest about defense. Defense is my favorite part of the game, so of course I had a lot to say. And as usual, I'm starting with the Oklahoma side, because Alabama fans know more from if you follow me on my channel, I talk a lot about Alabama. So we're going to talk about Oklahoma first, and then Alabama. Now, let's talk about Oklahoma's defense overall. They both play, Oklahoma's played 13 games, but they're number 108th in the nation in total defense. They've had 966 plays run against them for 5,825 yards, 6.3 yards per play, 55 touchdowns given up, basically 450 yards per game. One interesting thing I found out overall is that Oklahoma allows opponents to convert on third downs 45% of the time. So 89 out of 197 attempts on third down have been converted against Oklahoma. That is a troubling statistic for the defense in general. But let's talk about Alabama's version of these stats. Alabama, on the other hand, is number 10 in the nation defensively through 13 games. 849 plays run against them, which is like just a little bit more, a little bit over 100 less plays run against them than Oklahoma, for 3,840 yards, which is basically almost 2,000 yards less. 4.5 yards per play given up, 24 touchdowns, which is over half less amount of touchdowns given up, and for 295 yards per game. Alabama only allows opponents to convert on third down 31% of the time. That is 8th nationally. So 60 out of 194 attempts on third down have been converted against Alabama. So let's talk about those interceptions. Oklahoma's defense is 109th in the nation in terms of interceptions. Opponents have thrown 460 times against Oklahoma, and they only have 6 interceptions, which is really interesting. 460 passes and only 6 interceptions. That seems like a rough day. And you know, that number is hard because it's weird to think about, because when you think about the Big 12, they get a lot of passing attacks, a lot of heavy pass-oriented teams, and to get that many pass attempts directed towards you and to only get 6 interceptions, that's a low rate. So the reason why I'm harping on that is because Alabama opponents threw 396 passes, but Alabama has 14 interceptions. So Alabama has intercepted more passes at a higher rate on a lesser amount of passes. Now, one thing you do have to consider, so Alabama's tied for 22nd in the nation in that. One thing that you do have to consider, if you want to critically think about it a little bit more, you could consider that Oklahoma opponents could have thrown a lot of short passes as well. That's very well possible, so it's something to consider. You have to look at the games a little bit more, but just in terms of looking at the numbers, that's just something to think about. Now let's get into some more like the deeper parts of the passing defenses. Like I said, we're going to start with Oklahoma. Oklahoma's 128th out of 130 teams in pass defense. That's just bad. 290 completions given up on 460 passing attempts. Like I said, that's only 64 more passing attempts than Alabama's defense has directed against it. Oklahoma has 3,788 yards given up in pass defense, 24 touchdowns, 8.23 yards per attempt, that's important, 13 yards per completion, that's also very important, and 291.4 yards per game. Weirdly enough, Oklahoma has only given up 7 more touchdowns through the air than Alabama. There's a reason why, and you'll want to come back to part 2 of the defensive breakdown for that. 63% completion percentage the Oklahoma defense has given up. That sounds about right when you consider those statistics that I pointed out. That completion percentage, combined with 8.23 yards per attempt and 13 yards per completion, are the recipe for opponents' passing attacks consistently getting solid gains on every passing attempt. It means opponents are completing their passes a good bit over the majority of the time, while averaging a good bit over a first down every time they complete the ball. So I assume that this means that Oklahoma's intermediate pass defense is just terrible or in trouble when you consider that. And that, like I said, when you have like that middling passing attempts per, yards per passing attempt, and you have a really good yards per completion, that means that for all the passes that your opponents are completing on you, they're taking advantage of the middle game. They're like hitting you with 10, 15, 18 yard completions, and just like hitting them in succession. Oklahoma fans, maybe you can concur with that. Maybe you can verify whether or not that is true. That's my first assumption based upon that. Like I said, this is just me looking at the statistics. This is more of a statistical analysis of these, just based upon that. I've looked at some of the games as well. I'm going to continue to do that. Those are more my play breakdowns, but this is just looking at the numbers. Now let's talk about Alabama's pass defense. Number 13th in the nation. That's a weird way of saying that. They're 13th nationally. 205 completions given up total, which is 85 less than Oklahoma. 396 passing attempts. Like I said, only 64 less attempts against Alabama than Oklahoma has. But only 2,319 passing yards given up. 17 touchdowns. 5.86 yards per attempt. 11.31 yards per completion. Those numbers are important. Only 178.4 yards given up. And here's the kicker. This is why those numbers are important. Alabama opponents only complete the ball against them 52% of the time. Opponents have a 52% completion percentage, meaning that they only complete a pass half of the time that they try it against Alabama. And even when they do, they're not getting a lot of yards. So it's rare to see such a low yards per attempt on such a bad completion percentage. That lets me know that even when the opponent is completing passes, which is just a little over half the time, the production is very small. The gain on a single pass on average is negligible. 11 yards per completion is not that explosive. So when opponents are completing the ball, at the most, they're getting a first down on average. And that's only half of the time. And so that, yeah, it's just like, that just goes to show like the difference in the passing defense of these opponents. Now, like I said, this doesn't take into the context of maybe like the style of offense that you're playing in the opponents, but it's just a number. So there's just something really interesting to me. What do you all think about this? How do you think this will play out with Alabama and Oklahoma's passing attacks against these two passing defenses? What do you see coming about? Do you see these statistics playing it out the same way? I know some of you are going to have a lot of thoughts on that, and I want to hear it all. Give me a detailed breakdown of why you think these are going to play out exactly how the statistics are showing, or why they won't. Break it down for me. Show it to me in the comment section. I want to respond to everybody. Looking forward to what you have to say. Come back for part 2 of the defensive preview for this matchup. See you next time.